G'day. Well, another little video on healing and the healing of the mind from a spiritual perspective. And when I say spiritual, I am talking about the mind, because everything is mind. And if you've been following some of my videos and reading Course in Miracles or any other spiritual texts, you've probably come across the idea that the world is vastly different from the way you thought it was. Even if you're a quantum physicist, you'll realize, or if you're into quantum physics, you'll realize that things are far more weirder and wackier on a quantum level, on the infinitely small level of things, the atomic front, than you could ever imagine. And on the classic spiritual front, that's also the same thing. So just very briefly, you probably believe that you're a human being experiencing life in the world like everybody else, and going through one day at a time until the time you die. And whilst at first glance and first acceptance that might be easy enough to wrap your head around, and you probably wonder why and what's the point of it all, and why am I really here and everything. But when you start to ask those questions and look at answers to those questions, whether you're a quantum physicist or a spiritualist or whatever, you'll realize that what you first thought was the way that the world is completely backwards. And on a certain level, you only have to look at the newspaper or watch television to realise that things are pretty damn strange here. We have countries developing bigger and better weapons just in case someone else who developed a bigger and better weapon last time wants to use it, and we're living under this umbrella of threat all the time and fear. And that's one perception of the world, right? That is the literal physical perception of the world. Based in fear, rooted in death, and rooted in the idea that I'm a body and that I live in a world with other people who live in a world, and we have limited resources that one day we're going to have to fight over, such as land and primary resources and things like that. So when you get into the spiritual level and start to look at the big picture, ask the tricky questions, why am I here? You come across spiritual ideas which put to you that perhaps you're not here. No, I know that sounds wacky, because it seems like, well, I seem to be here, you know, everything's touch wood and the sky's blue, same as it was, you know. But, and it's not that I'm putting forth that you're not here, right, because that would be insane to try and deny the fact that you find yourself in this world. But the idea that this is not reality, that this is not what reality is, that this is a version of reality, or a, what would you call it, a preference, or a potential idea of what reality could be. And when you look at things on the quantum level, you realize that all of a sudden reality has no basis for a solid foundation whatsoever. It's completely not understandable. But the same thing on the spiritual level. However, on the spiritual level, you can have an experience, right? So when you pursue a spiritual path, and if it's a true one, I'm not talking about crystals and tarot cards. That's nothing to do with what I'm talking about. All that sort of stuff. That's just some new age field of circular thought that has no more bearing than any other field of thought in the world. But when you pursue a purely spiritual path that is aimed specifically at retraining your mind or releasing yourself from your dependency on ego thinking, what happens is you begin to have experiences, perhaps you might call them phenomena at first, and then if you're really disciplined and really devoted to your path, you'll have experiences of, I don't want to say transcendental, because that implies there's something for you to transcend, but non-temporal experiences where things disappear and reappear, and on the global, on the universal level. And in quantum physics, they have these little things called quarks, these tiny, tiny, infinitesimally small molecules that appear and disappear out of, they don't know where they come from or where they go to, but they just appear and disappear. And on the big level, on the spiritual plane, that is also the case. One of the teachings that I really love the most, because it's so comprehensive, and I'd mention it, I think, in pretty much every video I do, is A Course in Miracles, which at one level heals your mind from that constant chatter and nonsense and judgment and depression and anxiety and everything associated with having to cope and trying to understand your place subconsciously in the world and consciously. And on another level, prepares you, or it's hard to prepare you, but brings about a shift in the mind, a quantum shift in the mind, to enable you to be ready to enter into an experience of direct union with Source, or direct immersion in the singularity of life. Right, so it's one of those things. The spiritual path is something that most people just sort of dabble in it a little bit, you know, and they'll practice a bit of forgiveness and do a bit of meditation or yoga perhaps, and that may be as far as you get with it. But if you're extremely devoted, you'll put yourself to the test and become like a crusader or an adventurer, or what would you put it? Someone who likes to push the limits and the boundaries, and just as the same way that there are people in the world who love to do bungee jumping and wingsuit flying and downhill steep hill skiing and, you know, ride the big waves on surfboards. They push their limits. And spirituality is the same as that. You can completely push your limits if you want to, and confront the nature of that conscious field of thinking that we say is associated with what we think we are and the world and everything else, and push it to its limit, where you find the what would you call it, the alpha or the omega point, and then go beyond that. And I have this nice little memory. I don't know if you've ever watched The Truman Show, where Truman is starting to wake up. He starts to realise that his life is the same thing every day, that there must be more to life than this. And he tries to break free of the environment that he's in on the physical plane, and he has to challenge himself. And his greatest fear was to be out in a boat on the ocean, because he has this memory of his father drowned at sea in a storm or something like that. And so he pushes himself. He gets a boat, and everyone, all his friends are looking for him. They're all trying to keep him within the parameters of his environment. And he goes and steals a boat or something, and he heads off into the ocean. And sure enough, a storm comes, and eventually he goes boom, and he hits a wall. And he realizes he's been living in this kind of a dome, in this kind of enclosed system of existence. And in the end, he finds a door, and he just says, "See you later." And that's pretty much what spirituality is. It's like I look at my world and I realize the circular nature of everything that happens here. People are born, people die, generations come, generations go. This government comes in, that government comes in. And history is littered with indictments of every kind of civilization that's ever set foot on the earth, that's tried to do something, tried to bring about a peaceful occupation of the world and all this sort of stuff, and it all fails, and you wonder why. What is the point? You know, why don't we just grow vegetables and you know, all live together in the country and not worry about taxes and jobs and things like that, like we did thousands of years ago? Certainly it seems very beautiful, but you know, it's not everyone's cup of tea, I guess. But even beyond that, there is the questioning, why would I even do that? You know, the greatest idea of utopian lifestyle on earth is still bound under the strictures of time and space, beginnings and endings, right? And we have so many years depending on our karma. We have so many years from birth to the demise of the physical vessel where we lay it aside to try and work out the journey that we're on. Right? And the spiritual path is one way of working that out. And what I encounter, and what I encountered in myself in my earlier days with this, was that emptiness inside, that deep inner emptiness, that longing, right? And when I was a teenager, I tried my hand at everything. I became a punk rocker for a while, became a rock and roller, tried to fit in with all these different sorts of groups and ways of living and all this sort of stuff. And all of it it didn't fill me up in here, right? Because what I was looking for wasn't available out there in the world. I was looking for myself. And it took me a long time to realize that. And it wasn't until I finally had my very first profound experience of non-temporal experience of myself, of the true nature of my being, that everything suddenly fell into place and made sense. And it's hard to talk about, you know, to somebody who's not spiritual or has no clue about a spiritual path. Everything I'm saying now is going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about, Dave? And even though most people you speak to will agree that every religion has at its core some kind of similar philosophy or theology, if those things, you know, if all of those religious practices are aimed to be make you a more peaceful and loving person and connected with the one, with the all, in a more all-encompassing way, why is there so much violence and isms amongst the religious establishments of the world? So examining our existence externally is never going to work, right? We're going to bang our head against the wall again and again and again and just become keyboard warriors saying this isn't right, that's not right, we need to change this, we need to fix that. When really the only thing that needs to be changed and fixed in the entire universe is a sense of separation from self. And that happens in here, heart and mind. And that's a journey. You know, now I think it was Kabir that wrote, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." And that step is a decision. It's a decision to take a journey. It's the decision to change, to turn around from the way we are and embrace something new. Even if that new way of being, that new way of living, that new way of thinking seems an insurmountable load to learn and to embrace and to wrap your head around at first. It's like anything. If you were to study to become a brain surgeon, you would have a stack of books. You would have all these, you would have to read everything, study it, go to lectures and all sorts of, you know, it would take you many, many years. And the spiritual path is like that also. There is no sudden enlightenment. There is no sudden healing of the mind. Right? You don't just sort of go down to the store, buy a book and read it and go, right, I'm done. You have to put that, the principles of your spiritual path into practice in the situations that show up for you in your daily life, in your relationships. And that's forgiveness, patience, tolerance, and learning to let go of wanting it to look a certain way, letting go of all my expectations, my hopes, my dreams, and accepting that in this moment, here and now, everything is perfect and as it is meant to be. It cannot look another way, cannot possibly have been another way in the past, etc. Right? And whatever happens is meant to happen. Whoever I meet, I'm meant to meet. And if I learn to listen, right? Listening. If I learn to listen within, in the situations that I find myself in those relationships that I'm engaged in, I will hear the voice of truth speak to me through all of those things, all of those relationships in a connected sort of way that I will be able to recognize. Right? And we've all had those experiences of having a chat to somebody or watching TV or listening to a radio show, whatever, and all of a sudden you go, man, I was just thinking about that yesterday. It's as if the universe is a giant algorithm. It kind of is, right? So it's like the mind projects out onto the universe, onto a blank canvas, meaning, value, and attributes all these sorts of pigeonholed ideas to things this is good, that's bad, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, projects it out. And then you walk into it as if you don't know what you're walking into. You walk into a situation that represents your thoughts, right? You wouldn't know what anything is out there in the world unless it was your thoughts in your mind that were saying, that's a water tank, that's a tree, that's a dog over there. You know, it's kind of funny. The tendency is to think that something out there in the world is pushing my buttons, or something out there is setting off all my triggers. If this person acted differently, I'd feel better. If that person acted differently, or that person shouldn't have done this, that, and the other, because now it's upset me and I'm a victim. Right? Never. It's not the case. My mind has projected that out there, given it a value, and I react to it in here. My thoughts tell me what I think I see out there, what I think is going on. Right? But if you were a little child of 1 or 2 years old, you'd be looking at every situation that I can see, and you wouldn't have a clue what was going on. You just look at it. Look at that. What is that? What is that? Because you haven't put that familiar value to it. You haven't pigeonholed it, bracketed it. And the spiritual path is letting go of that habituation to judge everything and put it in a pigeonhole of yin and yang, better and worse, mine and yours, good and bad, right and wrong, and just see everything as a singular, altruistic condition of the mind, of my mind. Right, so I look out and I just see this is my relationship with the universe. This person is showing me something about myself that I don't like, not about them. I see a jealous person out there, or a greedy person out there, or whatever it is. It's like, if I react to it, it's mine. You got to put your finger on your own nose, right? So there's an opportunity for me to heal something in my mind, a way of thinking about things and situations and events out there that are the opposite of my new chosen altruistic view of the world, right? And as I heal it in here, as I forgive myself for or as I let go of my dependency on judging things that way, right? And things are habits. They're just habits. Our judgmental thought system is a bad habit that we've taught ourselves, right? And our spiritual thought system will become a system that is self-redundant, but whilst it has a value to us, it will teach us to let go of that judgmental system of thought and embrace the truth that exists as the bond between all things, all living things. All right? Now, there's no guarantees in the world. When you come here to this world, you don't know whether you're going to get a week, a year, 100 years, 110 years. You have no clue. Everything is completely at random, or seemingly at random. And the idea that I am let's say, walking through my own experience of self here and seeing myself and meeting myself everywhere I go, then gives me an opportunity to make the most of the time that I have by bringing to my mind a sense of purpose, which is healing, and a sense of fulfillment through that healing, through seeing the experience and witnessing to the experiences of that healing in my life, which give me a sense of fulfillment, that I am fulfilling my purpose because things are changing. Right? My purpose on earth is to heal, is to forgive. Forgiveness is my function here. Right? And as I forgive, I will see the changes occurring in my life and in the lives of people around me, and which will bring me the true witness to the fact that we are all connected, we are all one, and there is a better way to live, to be, to think, to see, and to interact with others in the world. So I hope that makes sense, you know, but every time there's a shift, there's going to be confusion. Every time you come up against a reflection of something you don't like and you choose to heal it in your own mind, there's going to be an upset. Right? Because everything in you is determined that that picture looks the way that it looks. This is Joe Blow. I've known Joe Blow for 10 years, da-da-da-da-da. There's no such thing as Joe Blow. Joe Blow is just an amalgamation of molecules and particles that I've given a name to. He's agreed to accept that name. And we have this kind of interactive relationship on the physical plane, But the truth, or the true nature of Joe Blow, is that he is spirit, one with me. And as I go through the process of relinquishing all my temporal or lower order concerns about Joe Blow, that's going to cause some kind of emotional rocking the boat in here. I'm going to feel out of sorts with it because I cannot hold a pure picture of him in my mind as whole and perfect as he was created as spirit, and keep a physical picture of him in there as well. I can only hold one thought in my mind in one moment. I don't have to choose. The spiritual path is choosing. Do I want to see the truth of this person in front of me, or do I want to see a story that has a past and possibly a future and all of this sort of stuff? Or do I just want to join with that person in the truth of our relationship and be happy? Let go of all the other shit. I don't care that Joe Blow stole $50 off me 5 years ago. I don't care anymore about thinking that I have to cross the street because it's too hard to face him because he was a prick, or, you know, any of that stuff. Let it go. Forgive. I'm willing to forgive myself all my judgments, all my stories, all my angst about all this. I'm going to feel it in here as I'm willing to forgive it, and I'm going to let it go. I'm going to give it up to God, to the universe, to the Higgs boson field, if you like, whatever you want to call it. So I don't really know if there's any more to that. But, I feel like I'm just repeating myself over and over now in all these videos, so I'm probably not going to do any more. Alright, well, I love you, and if you need help, like, inbox me. But otherwise, get yourself a copy of A Course in Miracles. Start reading it. Start doing the workbook lessons in the middle of the book. 1 lesson a day for a whole year. Follow the instructions, right? And begin to make changes in the way you think, so that you can begin to see changes in the way things are for you in the world as you transit through this temporary experience in the journey of the soul. All right, peace.